Dear colleagues, welcome and good afternoon to our session, The Promise of Citizen Science. My name is Wolfgang Porcher and I'm a Deputy Director General in DG Research and Innovation. Citizens, very important. And those of you who have followed the discussion on Horizon Europe might have noted that citizens are playing an increasing prominent role in the framework program for research and innovation. And why? I think there are mainly two reasons. The first reason is that if we want to be sure that innovation and new technologies are accepted by society, we need trust. And trust requires that we involve citizens in the design of our research programs, but also in the implementation of our research projects. We have a long time focused on involving researchers, which is evidently key, involving business, which is also key, but citizens play an increasing role again if we want really to ensure dissemination, exploitation and deployment of research results. And secondly, citizens are decisive if we want to have also acceptance of the European project, to have visibility for Europe. So this is why we really favor generally involvement of citizens in research and innovation. Now, when it comes more specifically to the citizen science, you know everything about citizen science, I assume. We are convinced that citizen science, which is part of our open science agenda, is an important tool to improve the quality of science because we can draw on collective intelligence. We collect more and better data, and we will certainly have examples here today. So this is also why we in the framework program, we provide dedicated funding for citizen science, be it projects that really provide dedicated funding for citizen science projects, but we also provide funding for projects that look at the governance and the framework conditions for citizen science to prosper. This is what we have done in Horizon 2020, and I think there are still calls out there. And in Horizon Europe, we have mainstreamed the issue of citizen science, and if you look at the strategic planning which we have sent out for consultation, you will find several places where we will make a reference to citizen science. Now, what is the purpose of this afternoon's session? It is to show on the one hand how citizen science works. It is to highlight, and that's the title of our session, the promises, but also the challenges of citizen science. And then it is in particular about getting your feedback as to how we should consider framework conditions to ensure that citizen science is prospering. So, without further ado, I would like now to introduce the first speaker. It is Rosa Arias. She is a CEO and founder at Science for Change, and I think she will discuss or present the D-Gnosis project. Please, Rosa.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, I'm going to explain very quickly in just 8 minutes, I could try, how do we do citizen science in the D-Gnosis project. So, let me see. Okay. We use citizen science to tackle odor pollution, and I will explain you the app that we have, our methodology, also how we are aligned with the SDGs, and how we can inform new policies. So odor pollution, for the ones that have not heard about it, is a type of air pollution, and it's always measured with people. because chemical perception is not correlated to human perception. So we always need noses, so it's a very good opportunity to use citizen science in this case. It's a second cause of environmental complaints after noise at the global level, accounting for around 30% of the complaints, and it also can act as a sign of alert of higher environmental problems or even sanitary issues. The thing is that there is no common regulatory framework associated to it, so people suffering from odor pollution are unprotected, generally over Europe, except some countries such as Germany or the Netherlands. And when there is a regulation, usually it's not coherent and sometimes even not scientifically sound. And it's not just the nuisance, it also has associated health issues such as anxiety, stress, or respiratory problems. It always tackled from the traditional way, from the top down, and we want to tackle this from the bottom up, started with the citizens. So why don't we change the paradigm? We have this very simple idea to create an app to co-create collaborative odor maps in the areas that are affected by the odor pollution. So this is the app. It's very simple. It geolocalizes you. So everywhere you are, in the streets, in your neighborhood, if you smell something, you simply have to take out your phone and use your nose, which is the best sensor to measure odors, to add a new dot on the map. So you just need to write the type of odor, the intensity, and if you like or dislike the odor, and a new dot appears on the map. This can be used as a citizen science experiment. So open data, everybody can add points in the map everywhere, but we are working in areas affected by odor pollution, and in there we validate the data and we correlate the data with industrial processes so that we can understand better the issue and try to find solutions to reduce the impact on the population. So like this, we created the DNOSIS project in the SWAPS program. We were very lucky to have the project to do this. And for us, it's very important to work with the quadruple helix because citizens are key for us. Without them, we don't have data, so we have no project at all. We work with the public sector, the environmental authorities in charge of odor pollution in the affected areas so that we can help them inform new regulations to protect the citizens. We work also with the odor emitting activities, the industries, in order to correlate their daily operations with the data gathered with citizens so that we can reduce the problem. And also we work transdisciplinary with not only scientists from the other sciences, but also from the SSH field, from co-creation and citizen science experts working together because we cannot forget that we are working with people. So the objectives of the DNOSIS basically are raising awareness on odor pollution, creating the International Odor Observatory so that we can put all information on the map. We are validating the methodology in 10 pilots all around Europe and also in Chile and in Uganda, probably. And we will be informing new regulations and created scientific standards to replicate the methodology further. We want to comply with Principle 10 of the Rio Declaration to provide access to environmental information in odor pollution, also to allow people to participate in public decision-making at the local level, and to access environmental justice. And not only this, because we go one step beyond, which our citizens are not only accessing the information, but they are generating new data sets that can help advance science. So our project is totally aligned with the SDGs, not only at the environmental dimension, but also at the social dimension. We work a lot with SDG 3, with health and well-being. And we, for example, are aligned with the gender one, also climate change, for example, because a lot of others are correlated with greenhouse gases. So also with economic aspects and the international ones. This is our approach to citizen science. We use the model that Muki knows very well because it comes from him, from the UCL, the extreme citizen science approach. This means that we don't want to work only with university students or PhD, but we want to work with all types of population, any literacy levels, because we all have noses, so we all can be scientists. Okay, and not only that, but also we want to work with any gender and any socioeconomical and sociocultural status. And we want to involve our citizens in all the stages of the research problem, from the definition of the question to the framing of the issue to the data collection and data analysis. These are our case studies. We work across Europe and also Chile and Uganda. And this is the Barcelona pilot, which is our pioneer pilot. Here, very briefly, this is an urban area, but very complex in terms of other emitting industries. We have a lot of waste management industries there and wastewater treatment plants also. And it's also very complex in socio-cultural status, because we have gypsy communities conviving with new rich people that came to this refurbished area of the city, and now they are democratized by the other pollution in there. And these are our first results. In Barcelona, we have more than 250 observations with more than 50 engaged citizens already. And we are starting to see what is going on when the other episodes are produced in order to work in the industries to reduce the impact on the population. These are some other tools that we are also developing in the project, such as the International Odor Observatory to inform policy making. We have the first policy brief. If you are interested, you can download it from our webpage. And this is another challenge of citizen science projects, which is the sustainability. First challenge is to engage the citizens, because it's very time-consuming. You need to be locally where the citizens are. This is the first challenge, but once you have everything set in place, the thing is how you maintain all this, who is funding this. So our strategy is that we created a startup, which is called Science for Change, and we want to exploit the diagnosis results, but not only that, in other affected communities, but also to tackle other socio-environmental challenges using the same methodology of participation, co-creation, and citizen science. And that's it. So if you have questions, I can answer later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Presentation. I think it's impressive to see that this kind of citizen science project collecting data on air quality has immediate impact also on policy making, in fact. Because I imagine that if you present public authorities the results of these data, the power and the pressure on public authorities to react is quite big. So I think that's quite an impressive example of citizen science having concrete impact on policy making. Thank you very much. Our next speaker now is Carole Palecco. She is from the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Science. Please, Carole, share your experiences with us.
Thank you. Oops. Well, yes, thank you very much. I'm really glad to share with you this session on citizen science, where I'm at the Natural History Museum here in Brussels, indeed. All natural history museums have the same mandates and missions, actually. We are performing research, we provide scientific services and expertise to the authorities. We have collection management, so we manage the heritage patrimony, notably in Belgium, in natural sciences, and we perform some education activities and public engagement activities through our galleries and exhibitions. This is the face that you know most, I'm sure. But a few years ago, we have drafted a new management plan, and we have decided to include in it citizen science as an operational strategy, and it appears that this new topic is quite transversal. So here are a few statistics, but I won't bore you with that. We have scientific staff, of course, and managing a large collection of 38 million specimens. And all these people are, either doing science or managing collections. We have museum visitors, so more than 300,000. And within these, we have the citizen scientists that are affiliated to the museum, which means that they have a contract with us, and they can come in the lab whenever they want, and they, there is a kind of protocol that you have to respect, but this is all. And this includes the 374 bird ringers that are all over Belgium and helping us out with birds migration. I would like just to present you a few highlights on these kind of the relationships that we have with the collaborators and their involvement into research. So recently there were seven volunteers that were actually digging in a quarry in West Flanders, and they were looking for shark teeth. And actually doing so, they were gathering also birds' bones, and it appears that these bones were really relevant for science, and they had 58 million years old. And so this went to our paleontologists and to ornithologists and made up a new information for science. And so they are really well acknowledged, and it has produced a publication. A second one is that SPIDI is a project that has been funded by the Belgian Science Policy Office. And it's just to show that there have been volunteers also contributing to this kind of project at national level. And they have been able to find a first record of land snail for Belgium. And then another aspect of collaboration is through the Global Taxonomy Initiative that is funded by the CBD, through which so missions are being funded to go abroad, and notably in Vietnam. And here you can see a collaborator with the second longest insect known to date that he has found over there. In terms of public, well, for the museum part, we have also, of course, activities, and notably these are the two large programs that we've had, experibird.be and Experilab. Experilab is our science truck that is going all around Belgium to the schools, and through this truck, actually, the schools have ordered a nesting box that is provided by the Experibird program, and through this nest box, you can school kids can observe through a camera that is placed in their courtyard, a camera that is placed in the nest box. They can observe the nesting of the birds, so blue teeth and white teeth. And it's been really a great win-win situation, both for the school kids that are being really sensitized by nature, making their observation, relating the data to the project manager in terms of the number of eggs that have been brought, that the number of hatches, the number of successful flights, and all this data through 2 springs, 2017-2018, have been transmitted to ornithologists at the museum and have been collected and have been given nice results regarding, well, the bird migration throughout Europe. And now it has been also attached to the bird ringing service from Belgium, so we can see where the birds are landing and where they are moving. Various lessons learned. As I was saying, it was really a win-win situation. Also, the teachers are learning a lot because it's a STEM activity, actually. I wanted to show you the different SWAFs projects that the museum had been involved, because it's a science hub in Belgium, and so it welcomes a lot of public, and notably for Voices, we've been organizing focus groups on waste management, because we are doing some activities on the North Sea. We were involved in Sea for Society. We've been involved in the Places project, and which have been making us work with local association on waste management in Brussels. Of course, the Digitos project that has made us make a huge step forward in terms of evaluation of our activities and support to new activities like the BioBlitz, so I'll talk about in a minute. And we're now in the EU Citizen Science platform as well. We've been organizing a Citizen Science Day, because thanks to this operational strategy, now we have a working group on citizen science, and we've been able to see all the various activities that are taking place in the museum and the domains. And the BioBlitz that we've organized thanks to the DTOs, well, with the support of DTOs, has been done 2 times, 2018 and 19. It was a very simple format with scientists, 4 scientists having each 5 to 6 people. It was for family, going in the Leopold Park, collecting specimens, coming back to the museum, observing them, having an identification, and long discussions about the various fauna and flora discovered there. And actually, well, this was a night trap, and this collection that was collected in Leopold Park is now in the collection of the museum and has been labeled DTOs and BioBlitz. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol, for impressive activities. What I particularly liked is to see that you can do excellent research and science, but at the same time contributing to science literacy, because I see a lot of young people involved in this exercise, school students. And I think a point which we might want to discuss is really also the link of citizen science to the contribution of science literacy, which I think in times of fake news is quite an important element for our societies. So thank you again very much for this contribution. Now it's our last speaker. It's Mookie Huckley, who is Professor of Geographic Information Science, and I would like to give him the floor. Please, Mookie.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to cover a bit of overview of where we are with citizen science activity, a bit about level of participation, some noticing the difference between different groups and how they participate, noticing the different cultural diversity, and then I'll demonstrate the range of activities that happen in different European projects, and especially talk about the EU Citizen Science Project. So one of the things that we can think about in citizen science is that there can be different relationship between scientists and the public working in different ways. And what is important is for different people, different projects, different sciences, we can have different ways of participating. From people just downloading software to their phone and contributing to science while they sleep, and to something where they go out and collect information in distributed intelligence. We can think about a more participatory science where the scientists are still leading but discussing the exact detail and the refining of questions together with the participants, or what we call at UCL the extreme citizen science, when the whole thing actually passes over to participants and is done by them, and then the scientists are becoming facilitators. Now, what is interesting is that, as I said, different people at different stages would prefer to do different things, and we don't need to assume that everyone should move into the top level as such. We should look also at the different range of activities that exist today within citizen science. So we have the long-running citizen science. Some of them have been running for 150 years, as in meteorology. We have citizen cyber science, which couldn't exist without internet and computing, so it's relying on that. Or we have the community science, which, like the extreme citizen science that we've seen before, require a high level of engagement by communities. So let's look at some examples of that through different projects. So first of them is it's from a project called Citizen Cyber Lab, funded by the ICT for Learning in FP7. And this is an example of a project where we had volunteer computing. People downloading software and helping scientists in Geneva and in Tsinghua University in China to develop new nanotubes in order to filter water, or the example that I mentioned earlier of putting it on your phone and doing it while you sleep. We discover real signs of learning and creativity happening in this project, happening during participations in this project. Or another one is the Every Aware project funded through FET Open, the early version of it in FP7, and in which we had over 500 people using an app and going around Heathrow to collect the noise level and the annoyance that they experience, and that also contributed to the policy around the third runway. And the link to Odor Collect, which is a current example of the same activity. We have also within the Doing It Together science project, DTOS, a bit of attention to the more extreme end of the spectrum with the DIY bio, the DIY science where people are developing their own tools. And one example of that, and that's an example from the CRI in Paris, where people are coming into a wet lab and starting to understand more things about genetic engineering and about the use of DNA in different ways, or an environmental example where people are building up sensors for integrating into flood monitoring. We also have within an ERC project that I'm running a work which we engage people without much literacy in citizen science. So we have developed tools, which we'll see in a minute, to allow people with very little literacy to be involved not just in data collection, but in the design of data collection, of deciding exactly what the information they want to collect. We created a data repository that takes into account cultural needs, things like, for example, who should see the data, how can we ensure that free and peer-informed consent, which we agree with the community, is following the data. And now we are working also on visualization so the people who collected the data can see it. An example of that is this Sapeli software, which, as you can see, provide icon-based interface for people to record the information, and as I said, is capable of this being designed in the field. We have an example of that very recently in Gbine in Cameroon. We had people, actually the local community, after using it, coming up and saying, we want to monitor those things. So Simon Hoyt, a PhD student who is spending now quite a long period in the field, designed the icons with them, which you see there, the design, and now they have the app to go around and collect the data. If we go back to DTOS, we kind of can now try and put all these things together. So you can think about, let's just use the example of the UK. So we have the total population of the UK, something like 64 million people. Now, how many of them passively consume science? Open the television, watching David Attenborough, or doing something similar to that. So we have, Blue Planet 2 received 14 million. We can push it and say something like 25% of the population. How many will actually take the kids out and go to a science museum? So the Natural History Museum have 2.1 million UK visitors. If we take the Science Museum group, which got another 6, we can kind of get ourselves into about somewhere between, say, 15% of the population that are moving from passive consumption of science to active consumption of science. We can then think about how many people capable of spending 1 hour a year going out and looking at the garden and collecting observation of birds and reporting it to the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. The number, as you see, about 500,000. Or if we'll take also other similar program, about 1 or 2% of the population. If we now look at people who regularly participate in online citizen science, like this volunteer computing or online project like the Zooniverse, the number now is 0.2%. As we move up to people who will go out every week in the summer and check for nesting birds and so on, we're now at 0.02%. And finally, if you'll check how many people are capable of actually running full DIY bio project, the assumption that I got from the community is there, 65. Okay, so 0.001 or something of that range. So here's a more generic way to think about these things, and then to think we have a magnitude of scale of participation as we move through this chain. And this thing that you see in front of you is called the DTOS escalator, which the thinking about it is that at different stage in life, you can be at different places. And this is go back to my ladder of participation, where it's kind of saying that different people will be in different places. You have kids, you don't have time, you want to participate for 1 hour. You reach retirement, you now have plenty of time. Join in, go up the scale. you have something happen to you. You go down the scale, so on. So if we can offer a more fluid engagement across it and see citizen science as part of the wider network of abilities to participate in science, we have huge potential within this concept. And finally, I'll talk a bit about the EU Citizen Science Project, where we are building up a platform that will allow for material and training and different resources to be available to the wider community. This one will be hosted by the European Citizen Science Association eventually and provide the sustainability, and is also providing different outputs such as understanding of quality of material, some new training that provide help for journalists, for policymakers, and so on, and it creates different opportunities to be involved in it. And finally, if you want a book about citizen science and learn about it, apart from the 2 copies here, which will give to the best question, what you can do is go to UCL Press website. It's free, it's open access, and you can download and share it. 10,000 people already download, so they can't be wrong. And that's about it. If you want to find more about my group, you can find it on these pages. Thank you very much.
Muki, thank you very much for a great presentation and for your efforts to analyze the different forms of citizen science when it comes to the degree of involvement of citizens. In fact, if I understand correctly, you have a broader concept of citizen science than citizen science just being excellent science, because the range of your citizen science is a very big one and very broad one. So I think now it is up to you. So what we have said is your task is to provide statements to how citizen science should look like in the future. How can we build on citizen science? What can we improve? So you are entitled to make your statements. But evidently, since these projects have been very interesting, feel also free to ask questions of any kind to our panelists. So I just would like to ask you to be not too long, but I think we have now almost half an hour. So if your questions and statements are a little bit longer, I think that is fine. Just indicate where you are from. Please, I see a colleague there.
Hello, this is Gerard Boer, City of Amsterdam. We are also involved in quite some of these city science projects, and I'm very curious what part of the process of mobilization of the people, of use of the final data, the data which is not present, so how you actually match the scientific quality with the observations. What part of all these processes is the most vulnerable, in your opinion?
So, I've forgotten one thing. If you have already a victim amongst the panelists to which you would like to address the question, feel free to focus your question to a colleague. Otherwise, I will ask the panel who wants to reply.
I can answer.
Okay, you are.
Rosa, please.
Can you hear me? Yeah. In our case, for example, we are validating data at 3 different levels. First level is at the individual level, because we want to identify potential fake observations for citizens that may be angry of the other pollution that they are suffering. They are very easy to identify, even though you think it could be difficult, it's very easy to see. Then at the collective level, we are defining, for example, what is an other episode. For example, 3 people or more than 3 people observing the same type of odor, for example, waste, in the same area at a similar period of time, for example, 1 hour or 2 hours. This will give the definition of the odor episode that we will correlate with the industrial processes. And then the third level is the scientific one. We're incorporating to each dot in the map this dispersion modeling, meteorological data at the time of the observation, and dispersion modeling to try to identify potential origins. So if in the retro trajectory of the air we have a waste emitting activity, and here a citizen observe waste odor, then we can associate this observation to the industry emitting the odor, and we can check what was going on there in order to reduce the impact. And finally, for me, the most vulnerable part is the engagement, because if we don't have data, I mean, with a proper training and scientific validation is possible. So citizen science can produce really new sets of data that are impossible to achieve otherwise. The important thing is the engagement, so as to produce the data for me.
Okay.
So another building up on this point, there is something important that actually there is a vulnerability with scientists. They're trying to, a lot of time, put the template of scientific process and quality assurance in it on a completely different tool and process. Scientific processing and quality assurance in science is structured around scarcity. The fact that you have very little money, the fact that you have very few people to do the work, so you all the time think about doing it only once and perfect. Whereas when you go into crowdsourcing or citizen science, you need to change the way you think about quality assurance. So for example, what Rosa has pointed out, crowdsourcing allows you to have multiple observations of the same thing, and that's fine. That's actually where you actually get your assurance. You can have hierarchical structure of different people that you trust more or less. You can have automatic rules of checking, just like Rosa pointed. Is it reasonable to have the information in place? And you have now about 7 or 8 different approaches to the analysis of information and doing it in the right way. Now, some people know how to do it properly, and that's exactly why bodies like the European Citizen Science Association got now a working group on data management and other things, and that knowledge needs to be shared widely so more municipalities, scientists, and other people will be able to use the right methods for citizen science data.
Thank you, Muki. I had then another question there, yes?
Hello, my name is Jiří, City of Brno. I would like to ask you if you can comment more on the role of the city, in the citizen science, as a public officer, what we can do from the strategical point of view to support this initiative in the city. I would imagine the engagement and these kind of stuff, but for example, a city-wide platform that will unite all these scientific ideas together or something like that. Thank you.
Well, I can give the example for Brussels. For instance, we have been involved in two, thanks to the Places project, we had to join with local associations, but also with the city, so the mayor and the Brussels capital city. And in that project, the idea was really to build up a city of scientific culture, which I don't know if we succeeded really, but the goal was really to work together on a concrete case, and actually we have been little by little, by consulting this local association, we've been building up a biodiversity path in the park near the museum, and we had, of course, to link with the authorities and the owners of this park. Actually, the owners of this park is the city, but there is also the European Parliament, and it's a very complex area. So the answer actually is that we have to collaborate. That's definitely the case. Be it the local authority, be it in the Xperibird or Xperilab, we've had joint projects with Google or with Solvay. Actually, the funding is now over, so if you are interested in these projects and to support, please do come and see me. But the key thing is really to not to do things on your own, but to see the local authority. And as long as it's, of course, the owner of the place, which is often the case when you want to change something in the city, then we have to go and talk together. What we did as a museum is to bring our expertise in biodiversity in this park and brought the citizens that were willing to change something about water management, and then discussed with the municipality to see how we could have this function together. And we built up a new a biodiversity path altogether.
Thank you very much. Carol, I have now a question there. Yes, please.
Robert Link, University of Graz, voice. Are there any projects focusing on social sciences objectives? All the projects presented are STEM projects. There are not one project about, for example, poverty, reduced inequalities, democracy, justice, trust. I think this would also be a very important area for citizen science, but of course very risky related to other objectives.
Thank you very much. A very pertinent question. Muki?
So, first of all, I would like to know that the ERC project that I mentioned, my ERC project is actually from SH2 panel, so it's a social science. We are actually working deeply in anthropology and in human geography, and the cultures and all the rest of it. The technology is there as part of a wider process. But more accurately, for your question, there is a growing area of citizen social science, and it presents specific problems. Like, for example, you can do a project with a deprived community, as I have done in different situations, but if you'll think about letting them collect personal data, as we do in social science in different times, and interview and then analysis of it, there are all kinds of local issues about who have access to the data, what they know about their neighbor, how much their neighbor want to disclose. Sometimes community want to do that, and we've seen example of that growing. There are some great examples coming from Liz Richardson from Manchester University doing work in this area. But it also presents paradigm challenge in the social sciences, where the scientists go to the field and kind of keep himself or herself as a participant observer. And participatory action research is kind of in certain niches within the social sciences. So I'm coming from participatory action research, which make my life easier within that. Jerome also comes from the same background, but we have issues even with the anthropologists because they need to get out of the field and get them detached and things like that, and create all kind of fascinating things. So we need both the theoretical work in the social sciences and the practical work about how to do it right, and we have some growing example of that, but it's a fascinating area, and it's a really important one.
Thank you, Muki. I have then a question here, please.
Thank you. Marc van from the Ministry of Science of French-speaking Belgium. Thank you for all these beautiful examples, but all those examples seem like, supposing a long-term investment with mostly local citizens or national level sometimes. And I was wondering, in your perspective, for all of you, what is and what should be perhaps the European added value in citizen science? What do we gain to scale it up at European level?
Thank you.
Okay. In the Gnosis, for example, our engagement model works at different levels. We start at the national level in the countries where we are working to identify the affected communities in other pollution, but then we go to the local level because it's a local issue. So what we can do to go globally is just to provide guidelines for replicability and to expand our methodology to other affected communities. But it will also be, always be like a local issue that you need to solve, and no solutions are the same for all the cases. So you need to be very localized. But in some other cases, movie will know a lot. You can go globally very easily. Like, is it me?
Which
I don't
mic
know.
is?
Okay, I will stay still. Or
Yeah.
in the case of birds as well.
Yeah, so I'll talk actually about Carol's institution. So one of the proudest things out of the DITOS project that I was lucky to coordinate was to see how Aurbins used this funding to transform itself, to actually start from a place where it was with some bits of the organization, I can say maybe, I hope that it's okay, Carol, to say that there was some suspicion, as scientists have, because exactly they're not familiar with the quality assurance method, they're not familiar with the approach, and they're kind of not sure if that's the right thing to do. And by the end of the project, is now part of the way they're doing business. So actually where we can see the scale up is in this cultural change in different organizations and taking pivoting organizations. The story of Aurbins, I think it's a fantastic one, because when you look at organizations that have been doing it just sort of forever, Natural History Museum in London, it kind of thinks, I can't be what they are doing. But we need to have those examples of places that went through the transformation and then use them as a template to move it in other places.
Thank you. Please.
It's okay?
Okay.
Hi, Stefan Bergmans. I work for Elsevier. I volunteer for Euroscience, grassroots organization for researcher. And I am doing research on open science, actual research. I very much agree with you, Wolfgang, in the sense that citizen science is so important for democracy, for the trust in science. So the statement I have, and then I have one question, the statement I have is, I think citizen science should be integrated in the reward system framework. But then the question is that realistic for all researchers? And how would you go about doing that? It is quite a challenge, I think.
Yeah.
Well, citizen science, as I was showing, there are examples, of course, of publications where the citizen scientists are recognized, acknowledged, presented, and it's clear that there's an added value for the scientists. In terms of it being really rewarded or rewarding, it's so sometimes it's really time consuming for the scientists to dedicate some time to the citizens in explaining or training or some citizens into his or her domain. So it's got to be, in a way, indeed it's not yet acknowledged or rewarded as such. It should be much more, just like science communication should be as well, the way to communicate the research being done. It's not really yet the case, but it's, as I said, it is through the publications, but it's not a reward and such. Yeah, not yet.
And just like the escalator that I was showing earlier, we got one version of it actually for scientists. And remember the order of magnitude as you go up? It's the same thing actually for scientists. There's been a survey in the UK, over 80% of scientists never share the paper on any social media, not even on their Facebook to their friends of saying, hey, I've got a paper, give me, like it's a great day for me, thing like that. And as you move up the scale, there is a smaller group of scientists, and we need to kind of think about it. Not every scientist should do that, so that's why there is a whole scope for the science communicators, for the museum, for the intermediaries to do this type of work, for this majority of scientists, and some of them are not suitable for also doing that, let's face it. But we need to kind of think how we encourage that, because indeed you'll find a lot of people on the edge of the system of being even pushed out.
Thank you very much, Muki. So I have now you, please, and then you. Okay, then it's the other way around. It's fine.
My name is Bata Zwierzyńska. I'm from European Council of Doctoral Candidates and Junior Researchers, Eurodoc. My question is connected to collaboration, or actually a request to elaborate on collaboration with whole NGOs.
for me, for example, in Denosis, we are working a lot with neighbor associations at the local level, which are NGOs basically. But in my case, it's always very local, but also key to engage the citizens because they are community leaders. And in some other cases can happen exactly the same. And they are key actors for achieving the engagement and starting generating the whole project, put everything together. You work with.
Okay. Please, yes?
Yes, thank you. My name is Susanne. I'm a Marie Curie Global Fellow at the University of Birmingham, doing my research in Brazil, mostly with young people, on disaster risk reduction and the food, water, energy nexus. My question is, do you have any experience from working especially like with young people aged, in my case, they're like 14 to 18, but also maybe younger groups? And what are the challenges that you would see in working with younger people not being of age?
Well, we of course welcome school classes and students at the museum, and we have dedicated workshops for them. It's true that at the museum, the teenagers or above 14 to 18 are those are the most difficult to grasp and attract to the museum. But we have dedicated workshops also for for the groups, for the school classes. So we try, notably with the Experilab science truck, and this might answer to the question on social sciences. We try to go to have outreach activities, so going in remote places where the school kids don't necessarily go to the museum or cannot go to Brussels to visit the museum. And so we go towards them and try to, we have these 9 labs in the science truck so that they can make experiments, and they are really enthusiastic. And these have, most of the time, they don't do that in their science classes, neither at school. So it's new experiments to them, encouraging them to like science. Same for the Experibird program. So these nest boxes are distributed now in 600 schools all over Belgium. So you can imagine it's really spread all over and has really an impact in remote places and interaction. Giving interactions between the school kid and the ornithologist that is treating the data and giving feedback. There have been workshops and information given back to these people, these school kids and the teachers as well, so that they know what are the results of their observations.
Thank you. Are there other remarks? Yes, please.
Thank you, Carlotta Bezotti from Civil Society Europe. I had a question on the first project linked actually to the comment about involvement of civil society organizations. So I'm a bit surprised that you didn't, from what your answer, you didn't involve, for example, organizations already working on air pollution, or you didn't partner, for example, with organizations who involve people from socially excluded areas, neighborhood, whether for education, culture, social issues, and who are faced with the problems that you are concerned with. So just to understand better, and then also to understand a little bit better in terms of how you really involve the citizens directly in the final in the conclusions of your research, and not just as passive data collectors.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first phases in our engagement model is the stakeholder mapping. So we map all the actors from the quadruple helix involving NGOs, CSOs, and everything else. From there, we select the key stakeholders in each local community where we are working. And in most of the cases, they are not like big NGOs, but more local, as I was saying, neighbor associations and some community champions, leaders of the communities that can help us with engagement. And from there, we have not started working. We just map the stakeholders. We have meetings with all of them. Also, we want to establish dialogues between all of them. So we meet together with environmental authorities and the neighbors that are angry, plus science journalists, for example, neighbors, everybody together. And from there, we start building up the actions in the pilots. So we co-design from the beginning what we will be doing to start collecting data. Included training. We also involve schools, for example, which are very useful to act as community multipliers because they can inform their parents, and we can go beyond just the neighbors that are coming to the meetings. And from there, we start having regular meetings and feedback with all of them as we plan with them. So we define like all the different stages of the pilot, included data collections, sensory walks to go through and start mapping odors together, trainings to understand different types of odors. We also visited even the odor emitting industries, which open up their doors and let us in so that they can see their industrial processes and see how the odors are generated and everything else. And then we also, with the first results, we went there, we present the results, we make them understand what we were seeing, and they explain also their perceptions. So we are working together all the time in all the actions.
Thank you very much, Rosa. Are there other comments, questions? This is not the case. It is the case. Yes, please.
Only one, just on how to embed this approach more and more in the systems of the universities. And that's difficult, but maybe it's an idea to put that into the tasks of the technology transfer offices, because they are now totally involved in spin-offs and spin-outs and money for new startups. But this is all, it's another side of validation of knowledge. And well, maybe it's an idea to have that, for example, let's say a full percentage of the activities of the PTO offices of the university should be addressing this kind of approach.
Yeah, I will give the floor in a moment to the panelists. But just my personal remark is that listening to all of you, I realized that citizen science is not only a challenge for citizens, it's also a challenge for the scientists, in fact, because how do they interact with citizens who are involved in doing citizen science? And in this new open science world, scientists are already quite challenged. They have to have open data, they have to have new reward skills, they have to interact with business, they have to do this, they have to do that. And in addition, they have to interact with society and with citizens, which is, I think, right. But on the other hand, I think we need also be aware that the cahier de charge of scientists is getting quite busy, in fact. But please. Okay,
yeah, so actually one of my proudest social achievements is that I managed to convince UCL to have a business development manager for social enterprise and charities. Actually, the Technology Transfer Office of UCL got a person in place that is dedicated to taking ideas from coming out of research and turning them into NGOs and social enterprise. We even had funding, and you can, if you look for a report called From Ideas to Social Enterprise. I've actually tweeted yesterday a link to that, which is written with now Matt Gabriel in Nesta and a few other people. And we wrote a document that will help universities and technology transfer office to think about how you take those ideas, because it's hugely frustrating that there is all kind of, sometimes it's research that costed millions of euros, that the academic out of it published a book, and few papers, and then they move to the next thing. And the ideas and the solution that can be based for fantastic social enterprise and solutions are just sitting there. And unless you have fantastic, like Rosa, kind of setting science for change or other things like that, it just won't happen. So we need to kind of also separate the ideas from the entrepreneur. So while in usual project or activity, you think that the entrepreneur should come with the ideas. Here we have actually a pool of ideas that are fantastic, and we need to kind of find entrepreneurs and tell them, here is an idea, run with it. And in our ERC project at the moment, we actually brought in someone to start developing Sapeli into a social enterprise, and he's working with us for 10 months, and then it will pass to someone else, and actually you can hand over ideas to someone to run with them. So those will be my 2 points on that.
Okay, many thanks. I think that brings us to the end of our session. I would like to thank you for your interest, for your rich contributions, and I would like to thank our panelists for introducing us in the world of citizen science with all their nuances and complexities, and I think they merit a hand. Thank you very much.